Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and later today we're going to have our upcoming crowdfunding campaigns for November. Generally, Mondays is 2-back or not to back, but whenever we don't have a 2-back or not to back, I try to have something crowdfunding related instead, whether it's upcoming crowdfunding campaigns, whether it's a talk or conversation around some form of top 10 crowdfunding, or today we're actually going to have two because we're going to have upcoming crowdfunding campaigns for November later today. Unfortunately, I'm just coming back from England right now, I assume right now, or something along those lines. That means I'm a little behind, and so I don't have my video up right on time because that's a time-sensitive video I need to film, which means I need to film it last minute, but that means it's going to go up later today. So stay tuned for that later today in case you want to see all the crowdfunding campaigns coming in November and the ones that you might want to keep your eyes for and possibly will pull you in and ways to spend money and all of that. But today I'm going to do a topic that I've done multiple times before and will do multiple times in the future, just a regular tips and tricks and reminders about ways to stay safe out there in crowdfunding and to spend as little money as possible in crowdfunding. I'm going to start with two bonus tips over here. The first bonus tip is don't watch my video later today. That's a starting bonus tip. If you don't know what's coming, if you don't know what there is to be excited for, that makes life a lot easier. My second bonus tip is over on Patreon. If you are a Patreon member, I have a series that's at the $5 tier and above, but I have a series called Unfair and Unbalanced where every single week I go ahead through the campaigns that I cover in 2-back, not to back, and I try to convince you not to back all of those things. It is a counter FOMO approach to things. It is called Unfair and Unbalanced. It's not fair. It's not balanced. It is counter FOMO, specifically designed and incentivized to try to convince you to back nothing, or at least as little as possible. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into these 5 tips over here. These are 5 tips. Some of these we've talked about before. Some of them are going to be new ones. It's just a regular ongoing reminder of ways to stay safe out there and spend less money, especially money that you don't really need to. Starting off with number 1, which is back at $1 or not at all. Not at all being the obvious choice, but back at $1 at the very least. I find that the time that you want the game most, when it comes to crowdfunding campaigns, the time that you want the game most is now. Now when the campaign is active, when there's a sense of pressure, there's a sense of, we have 2 weeks, we have this, I have to get this game because otherwise who knows what I'm going to miss out on. Weirdly enough, if you back at $1, which gives you access to the pledge manager, so you can convince yourself that you're like, hey, by the way, I'm keeping that door open for myself. But in reality, most of the time, a lot of the time, you can back at $1 and then you just stop caring quite as much. I'm not saying you don't care, but I'm saying if you care 100% during the crowdfunding campaign, you usually only care like 75% when it gets to the pledge manager phase, and very often you care even less as time goes on. So it's not that there aren't good games to back, it's not that there aren't great games out there, but if you back at $1 and use that as the reason, that's usually a good enough reason for you to sit there and say, I don't know if I need this game now. Sure, I needed it when it was on crowdfunding. I needed it when that Kickstarter or GameFound campaign was running, but I don't need it anymore at this moment. So backing at $1 will save you a lot of money, despite those unnecessary dollars that go out the window. When I say or not at all, I mean that you can also just set a reminder. Set a reminder to yourself to check the crowdfunding campaign down the road, check the pledge manager, because most of the time, I think all the time, but like most of the time, if not all the time, you can get in on the pledge manager if even without having to spend the $1 in advance. And so you can save yourself that $1, you can save yourself that emotional investment or all that. Set a little reminder for yourself, be like, great, in like 2 months I'll check the pledge manager, and like that, I'll back it then. You'll back it then. Don't worry, you'll back it then. You're not fighting yourself here. The secret is you won't actually back it then. So back at $1 or not at all. It's a great way to save a lot of money in crowdfunding. Tip number 2. Look at your unplayed games. Look at the unplayed games on your shelf. Now, if you don't have any unplayed games, you can skip to the next tip. This one won't help you over here. But if you do have any unplayed games, whether you have 1, whether you have 372, I don't have 372, I'm much better than that. I specifically chose a high number to make myself feel good inside. But if you have 1 or 372 or 4,649 unplayed games, however many you have, are there games on that list that you want to play? Are there games on that list that you are actively chomping at the bit to get to the table? And if so, why are you adding to that pile? Sure, that game on crowdfunding right now looks so appealing. It looks amazing. It's that game you've been missing, right? It's that game that's going to make yourself feel complete, your life complete. It's going to fill that void in your collection. By the way, speaking of which, what void is it filling in your collection? Is it a good 2-player game? Is it a good 3-player game that takes an hour and a half and is a little lightweight? Define the void that this game is filling in your collection, because ultimately, if you're filling a void when you buy a new game, then you're filling a void. Otherwise, you're prioritizing which ones of your games you're going to pick, and that just means games you already know and love might get played less as well. So that's another thing to take into account, but that's not even the point of the conversation here. The point of the conversation is how many unplayed games do you have, and why are you adding to that pile if you're already not keeping up or going through those fast enough? Because guess what? You could spend $142 on this ultimate amazing crowdfunding campaign that looks so appealing, or you could just play the game right here that you want to play, you know you want to play, but you're like voluntarily assigning yourself more homework when you have the game right there. You have it. I'm not saying you shouldn't have unplayed games. I'm not even saying play the games you have. You should play the games you have. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying play the games you haven't even played yet. Like, do that. Do that at least. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3. How often are you playing those $100 games that you're backing now? When you back a $100 game, how often are you playing? Is that cost per play worth it? When you look at the last crowdfunding campaigns you bought, look at the average prices, the ones that arrived already, and we're talking about the ones that arrived. Look at those games, look at the ones that arrived, look at the average cost per game, look at how many plays you're getting out of them, and try to tell yourself or convince yourself, are those numbers reasonable? You know that $422 all-in? Did you play it twice? If you did, that's not a great ratio. What about that $72 game? Have you played it once? Not at all? Look at the average cost per play that you're taking on yourself as you continue to back these crowdfunding campaigns. Look around your games. Look around your game shelves in your collection. You add up all the various crowdfunding expensive games, because they generally are more expensive. Get to like $3,000 to $5,000. Put them all on a table and be like, this is how much $3,000 to $5,000 is worth, and how often am I playing these games? How often are these games getting tabled? Because lots of the time, they are games that look beautiful. They're games that look at the shelves, the games behind me over here. Some of these games get a ton of play. The Zombicides, those get a lot of play. I enjoy those. Monumental, let's not talk about Monumental. Let's not talk about it. So when you add up these games, sometimes you'll get games that you play a lot, and those are great. Other times you get a ton of games that are just taking up space, just taking up mental time, and they aren't even getting played. And remember that cost per play aspect, because it's so easy to justify things. I can justify things. Marvel United, I spent a lot of money on Marvel United, and I have played that game so much, it is totally worth it. Master of the Universe, went all in on that. Haven't played it since I got it. I played the prototype, but I haven't played Master of the Universe since I got it. Let's not talk. We're not talking about me today. We're talking about you. Let's move back to you over here. How often are you playing those $100 games? So that's number 3. Try to think about how often you are actually tabling these expensive games, and then rationalizing whether that cost per play is worth it or not, or possibly just skip on another crowdfunding campaign or two. I'm not even saying don't get it. I'm saying back at $1 and get it in like 2 months. We're not even saying don't get it. Tip number 4. Look at your favorite crowdfunding games in the past. Your favorite crowdfunding games. Look through your collection. Look at the ones you love. Whatever it is. I don't know what it is. I have no clue. It's your collection. It's not mine. But find your absolute favorite crowdfunding games. Is it Vindication? Good choice, by the way. Unsettled? Another great choice. What about Mythic Mischief? You have fantastic taste. Absolutely fantastic taste. Look at all these games. Look at all these games that exist and try to find out. Just look through what's available online. What are your options if you wanted that game today? What are your options? Could you still get it? What's the price point? What's the price point now compared to getting it on crowdfunding? What's the price point on the secondhand market if you want that all in pledge compared to what you spent for it? Look at those numbers, because at the end of the day, a big part of what drives our crowdfunding spending is that FOMO, that fear of missing out, that fear that we can't get what we want in the right way, at the right time, at the right place. So do that math. Look at your best ones, your favorite ones, these success stories of what you've backed, and then try to validate how much would it actually have cost you to go ahead and gotten those games. Because if the answer is you could still get them, if the answer is, and by the way, there are times, just for the record, there will be times where you will either have to pay through the nose or be unable to get it. So there certainly will be those times. But they are the exception. They are not the norm. Most of the time, the game that you back, the game that you love, the game that you're so thrilled that you have, you could still have gotten it down the road, very often cheaper. Not all the time, but very often cheaper. And so look at your favorite crowdfunding games in the past, check their current pricing and availability, retail, second market, whatever, and then compare it to what you spent for it, and then realize that the FOMO is not nearly as FOMO as they'd like to have you believe. And finally, Number 5 hurts. It's fortunately for me, actually number 5 is probably the least effective tip because it's not as relevant, but again, we're talking about you today, so let's focus on that. But how often in the past has a game showed up that you backed and you didn't play? Oh no, sorry, I'm sorry. Tip number 5 does apply to me. Never mind. I forgot that I changed the wording so that it would apply to more people and so that I'd feel worse about myself, and hopefully you'll feel worse about yourself. The good news is it does mean you might back fewer games. But tip number 5 is how often in the past has a game showed up that you backed and then you didn't play it for who knows how long. The original wording was that you weren't even excited when it showed up, and then I realized that most of the time I still am excited, so like once in a while something's not exciting, so then I changed the wording to how often do you not play it for a while. Then I felt worse about myself and I decided to make this video. So there's that. But yeah, how often have you backed a game, it showed up, and then you didn't play it for a month, 3 months, 6 months, what about a year? How many games in your collection? How many crowdfunding games? In fact, that's going to be the question of the day. Okay, the question of the day for this video is look through your collection, look through your crowdfunding games, and respond with how many crowdfunding games do you have in your collection that showed up at least a year ago and you still haven't played? And for some of you, that answer is going to be 0. Some of you might be like 6 months, sure, but like a year's a decent number. Some of you might say 0, in which case, congratulations. Maybe you can consider backing some crowdfunding campaigns. But the higher that number is, the higher that year number is for whoever is watching this video, the more you should consider cutting back just a tad on your crowdfunding. And again, cutting back doesn't mean cutting back. It means backing at $1 and then backing in the pledge manager. We know you'll get it. It's all fine. It's totally fine. And so do that. Look through those numbers. Crowdfunding is an incredible place. I think crowdfunding genuinely is an incredible place. I think some of my favorite games in my collection have come from crowdfunding. A decent percentage of my collection's best games are crowdfunded titles. I think crowdfunding can bring a lot of joy to the tabletop space, and I think it can bring projects to life and bring games to life that wouldn't otherwise exist. I am not critical of crowdfunding, but I am mindful. I'm mindful of the benefits and the downsides of crowdfunding. I'm mindful of the benefits and downsides of ourselves, of how much money we spend and is it worth it. I'm mindful of how often are we collectors and how often are we players. And it's fine to be a collector, but there's at least recognize and own what you are and whether you're making financial decisions that make sense for your budget and your finances and all those things. I'm mindful of just doing things that try to do things, whatever they are, try to do things understanding what the impact is. If you want to buy a game that you're going to play once and cost you $142, but you're okay with that, that's fine. But at least know that walking in. There are many things you can do to be more mindful. Mindful does not mean not engaging in this hobby. Mindful does not mean not backing an obscene amount of games. Mindful just means being aware of the consequences of what you do, being aware of the impact of what you do, and making decisions accordingly. That's the thing I'm for. I'm for understanding the impact and consequences and then making decisions around them. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Later today, there'll be a video of the upcoming crowdfunding campaigns for the month of November, and I highly encourage you to skip that video. Until next time, I hope you have a good one.